Hey guys, it's Jasma, and today we're going to make a buttercream flour cake. This is a very delicious cake that has a white chocolate mousse filling and has a very pretty finish. We're going to decorate this cake with some buttercream flowers, so it would look very pretty and you can impress pretty much anyone at any occasion. So let's get started. For the ingredients, you will need one 9-inch chiffon cake, one batch of white chocolate mousse, 150 grams of softened unsalted butter at room temperature, 200 grams of icing sugar, 1 tablespoon of heavy cream, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And the recipes for the chiffon cake and the white chocolate mousse will be in the description box down below. There are 4 parts to making this cake. The first part is the cake itself. I made a chiffon cake today and I have a video on how to do that, so go and check that out. The second part, you will need to make a white chocolate mousse as the filling, which I also have a video on how to do, and the links to both videos will be in the description box down below. The third part, you will need to make the buttercream flowers. In a stand mixer, I have a paddle attachment, and I suggest you do use a stand mixer or a hand mixer. Try not to do this by hand because you're going to have to beat the butter for a very long time. I'm going to add in my room temperature butter. And we're just going to beat this on high speed until it's nice and fluffy for around 5 minutes. It's been around 5 minutes. You can see the color has lightened up a lot. It's almost white in color now, and it has definitely grown in volume. So I'm just going to scrape down the beater and the bowl, and we can start to add in the icing sugar. I'm going to add in half of the icing sugar, beat for around 3 minutes or so, starting on slow speed. Wait for the icing sugar to pretty much be incorporated with the butter, and then turn the speed up to half. Always remember to scrape the bowl to make sure everything is nice and incorporated. And we're going to add in the last bit of icing sugar. And mix it for another around 5 minutes. Scrape down the bowl, of course. And now add in the vanilla extract. The buttercream has mixed for the last 5 minutes. You can see it has really paled in color even after I added the vanilla extract. We're going to use a little bit of the heavy cream to lighten this up. We are going to be piping this, so you don't want it to be too loose, but you also don't want to use all of your strength to pipe out the buttercream. So I'm just going to add in about a tablespoon. Mix that in until it is completely incorporated. The buttercream is now ready. It has been beating for 16 minutes in total. And you have to whip it for enough amount of time so it's nice and fluffy and pale in color. I'm just going to give the bowl a scrape. And you can see this is quite a thick consistency buttercream because we have to pipe it out into a flour and it has to be able to hold its shape. Today I'm going to be dyeing a third of my buttercream a golden-ish, brownish, orangish color because I didn't really have a golden food coloring for this. So what I used is a lemon yellow, some red, and some cocoa powder to get that brownish color. So first I'm going to take a third of the buttercream. And you always want to make a little more than you think you need, just to make sure you have enough. I'm going to start off with the yellow. This is going to be sort of like the base color. So always start off with a little because you could add more, but you can't take away. So I'm going to add that in and mix it through. And I like to use gel food coloring, but you could use liquid food coloring, but you're just going to need a little more because gel food coloring tends to be a lot more concentrated. But I like to use the gel food coloring because it doesn't mess with the consistency of this buttercream. I like to use a toothpick just to make sure I don't add too much. Now I'm going to add in the red. And speaking from experience, make sure you go light on the red because the red tends to be really concentrated and you don't want to add too much. I'm just going to add a little bit to start it off. This is now a light pastel orange. And again, you could change the color depending on how you like it. And you don't even have to do the color I'm doing. You could even use pink, purple, really whatever you like. I have my light pastel orange color. So now to that I'm going to add a teeny bit of cocoa powder to make it a little brown. Now obviously you could just use brown food coloring, but you know me, I like to use natural stuff. I'm only mixing up one color today because I want sort of like a golden theme for the entire cake, but you could do different colors for different flowers. I am now happy with my color. I mean, this looks kind of golden, right? So I'm just going to leave it the way it is now, and we can start loading these into the piping bags. Today I prepared 2 bags. So for one, I have a large petal tip at the bottom. It is a Wilton 125, so I could pipe roses and big leaves with this tip. And for the other one, I have a coupler on the bottom, so I could switch around the tips without needing to use many different bags. So for the first one, I have a Wilton number 81, which pipes really pretty flowers. I also have a Wilton number 102 to pipe out smaller leaves and smaller roses. This is also a petal tip. And finally, I have just this small round tip. It's a Wilton number 5. And you don't really have to have a tip for this. I just want to have nice round dots. You could also just load the frosting into a Ziploc bag and snip off the tip. What you'll also need is some square pieces of parchment paper, which you could cut up yourself. A flower nail, which you could find at Michael's or an arts and crafts store. And this is where we will be piping our flower. A baking tray to place the final products on top. Once you got all of your equipment, you could start to pipe the roses. So first I'm going to fill the bag with this tip. This is the Wilton 81. I'm just going to fill this bag with the white frosting. Piping out buttercream flowers don't take up that much buttercream, so you don't need too much buttercream in your bag. And you also don't want to overfill your bag because the heat of your hand will melt the buttercream a little bit, so you don't want to have too much in there. I'm just going to push all the buttercream to the end. Try not to have too much air pockets in there. That's going to interfere with your piping. And this all seems quite complicated. And it kind of is, but you just need to have the right equipment to come up with the right results. Once the bag is filled, we can start piping. So first, pick up your flower nail and place a small dab of frosting right in the center. This is just going to stick the parchment paper down. Place on your parchment paper square and try to make them big. So start out from the side and you want the bigger edge to be facing down. We're going to pipe in a circle, pressure on the bag and pull away. Oh, and this is going to form the petals. This might not make any sense, but you'll see. And this is going to take a lot of practice to get right. So don't worry if it doesn't come out right at first. And for the second layer, just overlap the petals a little bit. Just keep piping in layers. Usually pipe about 3 to 4 layers. Once you're done like that, just leave the center plain and we'll fill it with some yellow. Now just carefully slide it onto the baking tray so we could put it in the freezer and peel it off to place on the cake. And I'll just keep piping more of these different sizes. Next, I'm going to be making a rose with this Wilton 125. This is a large petal tip. And I'm going to be showing you how to do a two-tone effect. So first you want to find the corner of your tip, which is here, and that's the side that you want to paint the color. So I usually like to do it to the seam so you can follow the line. I'm going to be using a palette knife today to make my two-tone effect. So get a little bit of the color, and we're just going to put it where the corner of the tip is. And this way, later when you pipe the rose, the top of the petals are going to have this color. And you want to put a good amount, or else it's not going to show up that well. You see I have a nice streak of the color right in the seam of the bag. I'm just going to fill the rest of the bag with the white buttercream. And you're not going to need too much of this. So don't overfill the bag, of course. I'm just going to push the frosting down to the end of the bag. You could also use a palette knife, a book, or pretty much anything straight. And just secure the bag and we could start piping our rose. So I have my flower now. We're just going to pipe a little bit of the frosting. You want the big end of the tip to be facing down when you're piping, like that. So the top of the petals are going to be nice and skinny. Pipe a blob in the center, then just pipe the center of the rose. Pipe 3 petals, and you want the tip to be flaring outwards. Then pipe 4, piping until the size is the way you want it to be. So I'm going to make 1 big rose. I've now switched over to the Wilton 102, which is the smaller petal tip, to pipe smaller roses. I switched the tip to the number 5 tip, which is the round one, and I'm going to do the centers of these flowers that we piped earlier. You could just do a round dot like this, and make sure it's connected to the petals so it doesn't fall apart later, but I like to do like tiny little dots. And I'll place these into the freezer until it is completely frozen solid. Next, assemble everything together. Now we can level off the top of the cake and cut it into layers so we could fill it and decorate it. So I'm going to be using a serrated knife to slice off the top, but you could also use a cake leveler to make sure all the layers are perfectly even. So I'm just going to cut off the dome, and having a turntable to do this is much easier. As I was saying, you could also use a cake leveler to level the cakes into even layers, and this is a quite handy tool to have if you like to make layered cakes. So today I'm going to be slicing my cake into 3 layers, but you don't have to do that. You could also just do 2 layers. And of course you could use a serrated knife if you don't have a cake leveler. You can see cutting it with a cake leveler makes it perfectly even and also not as crumbly. I have all 3 layers of my cake, and I have filled my piping bag with a round tip with my white chocolate mousse. I have a video on how to make that, and the link will be in the description box down below. And I also have my buttercream decorations ready. So now we're ready to assemble the cake. Today, to fill the cake, instead of spreading it on the mousse, I'm going to be piping it, and this is going to give it a really fancy finish. So I'm going to pipe blobs of the mousse around the edge and then work my way in. But again, you could spread it if you like. Leave a little bit of space from the edge so the mousse doesn't come squirting out later on when you sandwich the next layer. And try to make the blobs relatively the same size. And if you find the mousse a little bit too runny when you're piping it, you can place it back into the fridge for it to chill. Place on the next layer of cake and just press it down a little bit so you could sort of squeeze the mousse out the sides. Now place on the final layer of cake, and again press it down slightly. Finally, we can decorate this cake with the buttercream flowers that we piped earlier. Now today we are making a naked cake, so I'm not going to be covering this entire cake with frosting, and I'm also not going to cover this top of the cake with frosting either. I'm just going to place the flowers right on top and gluing it down with some more buttercream frosting. But you could cover the top with frosting if you like. I'm just not going to do that today because I feel like the color of the cake would really make the flowers pop. So I'm just going to arrange the flowers however I like, but you could just change this according to how you want it. Just peel off the back of the parchment paper. Type a little bit of the buttercream on the bottom so it sticks. And arrange it onto the cake however you like. And try not to handle this for too long because it will start to melt. Slide a leaf underneath the flower while it's still frozen so I could pick it up. Place a little buttercream on the cake or on the flower and just place it right on. And again, work fast because it will start to melt because of the heat of your hand. The cake is now finished. I've let it firm up in the fridge for around 15 minutes, and I'm just going to transfer it to a cake platter. That's how you make a chiffon cake decorated with buttercream flowers and filled with white chocolate mousse. I have 2 separate videos showing you how to make a chiffon cake and white chocolate mousse. The links to those will be in the description down below, so please go and check that out. I will have another video on showing you how to make cake pops with the cake scraps from this cake, so make sure to stay tuned for that as well. I really hope you can try this cake out. It is very delicious, also very pretty, and very impressive for pretty much any occasion. So, thanks for watching, and see you guys next time. Bye!